Hello everyone, it is Stephanie here and welcome to my channel. So today is session 3 of Tuesday's Tips, Tools, and Strategies for Parents. So if you haven't seen, we are on session 3, and if you haven't seen session 1 or 2, I'll link them down below because you should go back and check those out because again, we are building on the skills that we're learning each week that we come together. So I'm going to recap real quick. So in session 1, we learned about reflective listening and responding to our kids, and we talked about the importance of that, what kind of language to use. I'm not going to get into details about that, but remember, it really helps the child to feel understood, and it helps the adult to understand the child. So it's a really important skill to learn. So we talked about that in session 1. Session 2, I taught you the ACT method of limit setting. So we talked about that, the language to use and how to use it, and your homework was to start using that model with limit setting with your kids. So remember, the ACT model is only 3 simple steps. So, and one thing that I suggested is that you put those steps on a note card and you put that in your back pocket. So when you came across a situation where you were going to have to set a limit, you could pull this out as a little cue card to remind you of which step goes where, right? And so we don't forget a step, because that's really important. So remember, the A is for acknowledge the feeling. So we would say something like, Johnny, I understand you're feeling angry. We always want to use the child's name in front of what we're saying. Then we're going to communicate the limit, and that might be something like, but toys are not for kicking, my shirt is not for tugging, books are not for throwing, whatever that limit is, whatever the child is doing at the time. And then we're going to target the alternative with no more than 2 choices. Okay, so then we're going to provide the child with 2 choices, and then we're going to step back, and then the child is we're going to wait for him to choose. And remember, if Johnny doesn't choose, and I would repeat the alternatives no more than 3 times with a pause in between if the child is having a hard time to make a choice. Now, once he hasn't, then you're going to calmly let him know that because you're not able to choose, you are choosing for me to choose for you. And that's when you're going to set that consequence for the child. So don't forget that, okay? All right, so we're going to talk more about why we are providing these choices when we're limit setting, why we're even doing that, and what's the importance of it. But before we do that, I wanted to just talk about what to do when limit setting isn't working. So maybe you started this because what I don't want to happen is if you have some struggles, okay, it's the first week, so this is something new, and so I would hope, or I wouldn't hope, but I would expect that you probably ran into some glitches or difficulties. That's normal. But what I wouldn't want you to do is just throw your hands up and say, this doesn't work, I'm not doing it. All right? So, because if you consistently practice this method and model, it's going to work, period. Okay? So let's talk about some things that might be going on that may have been causing you some difficulties. Now, you may have found that you did it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, worked great, but then Friday, Saturday, not so much. All right, so let's talk about that, some potential problems and some things I want you to think about. Number 1, you need to look for, are there any natural causes or reasons why this is happening? So what I mean by that is, has there been a change in schedule? Is there some stressor going on? Is the child sick? Has the child been sick? Is the kiddo tired? Is the kiddo hungry? We want to look at, are any of these things going on? Because we have to take care of those things before our limit setting is going to be working. So you need to look at those things. When we were doing this, are there times where we weren't able to remain in control and be calm and neutral? Or were we able to do that? And if there were times when we were having a hard time, Could we recognize that? And did we step away and take care of ourselves? Did we do some deep breathing? Did we calm ourselves down? Did we get ourselves back in a regulated state and then come back to this? Okay. If you're not in a calm, regulated state, you need to go take care of yourself. And you need to have some tools and strategies to be able to do that. Now, you can look on some of my other videos. I talk about deep breathing. I talk about all kinds of things to help us get back into a calm, regulated state. So you got to think about that. Were you able to do that? You don't want your child to see you kind of losing control as well. What about the limits that we're setting? And the consequences, are they reasonable? Do they make sense for what's going on? Did we allow our child to either obey or disobey? Because remember, they need to be making that choice. And are we saying, you know, if they're not, you have made the choice to have me choose for you. Okay, is that going on? So make sure. So here's an example. If you choose to watch TV instead of going to bed, then you choose to give up TV tomorrow. See how that works? Okay. Never ever tolerate any type of aggression or violence. So if a kiddo is being unsafe to himself or someone else, you have to intervene. It is not the place where we're going to try to teach a lesson. We really need to be in a calm, regulated state. So because that's going to actually help the child to calm down. But if a kiddo is getting out of control where they're unsafe to themselves or someone else, it's time for you as the parent to perhaps hold that child. I had a kiddo. My kids are all grown-ups now, but I did have a child that 2, 3, 4 would have some pretty serious temper tantrums where he could start to get so dysregulated that he was being unsafe, and I would have to sit and hold him. And when I was doing that, I wasn't doing a lot of talking. I was trying to remain very calm, wait for my child to calm down, and then be able to do some of that reflective listening and responding. Okay, so if it gets to that point, you're going to have to do that. Now, if you're a teacher in a school, no, I'm not suggesting that you grab a child. There are people trained in all schools to be able to do that. So that's just where you would need to go, make sure you get some help. And hopefully we can kind of see signs and symptoms of that before it escalates. But that's something to think about. So again, if the child refuses to choose, we're choosing, and that is a choice. And are you enforcing your consequences? So don't ever state a consequence that you can't follow through on. So think about during your week, did that happen at all? It's okay if it did. We're just going to back up and reconsider what we're doing for consequences. How did you do when your child started to cry and get angry when you started setting these limits? Because if you remember, I told you last week that when you start doing this, it might get a little bit worse before it gets better, because that kiddo is going to want to push the boundary even harder. Okay? Because typically they're able to get their way with that behavior, and you just got to remain tough. So rethink your consequences and think about, oops, did I say I was going to do something and then I didn't follow through? Remember, when you do this, you lose all credibility with your child, and it just creates harm to the relationship. Okay? It creates this place where the child can't really trust what you're saying. You really need to think about that. And this is very problematic for lots of parents. So don't set a limit. Don't set a consequence that you're not going to be able to follow through on. So if you did that, then what you need to think about is, well, I can't use that consequence because right now I just can't follow through. Okay? So think about that. You need to be able to recognize signs of a more serious problem. So if you have a kiddo that's having extreme temper tantrums, is getting really dysregulated on a frequent basis. Now, all children have temper tantrums for a variety of reasons. But if you're noticing that this is happening with your child very frequently, then I would say that this is probably the time you need to go get some professional advice, and I would start with your pediatrician. There could be multiple things going on. It could be something physical. It could be something like ADHD. It could be something on the autism spectrum. Maybe there's some kind of stressor happening or trauma. There could be a multitude of things. So if this is repeatedly happening, then I would suggest that you go and start with your pediatrician and have a conversation about that, because there could be something more serious going on. Okay, so think about those things. And yes, your homework is that you're going to keep doing the ACT model, and you're just going to be building on those skills. So let's remember that providing children with age-appropriate choices is going to empower that child, okay? Because it's going to give them a measure of control over their environment, and that's super important. When a kiddo has to make a choice, they have to tap into their inner resources. They can't just look to the adult kind of solve their problem for them. So yes, providing choices gives a child the opportunity to practice making choices, problem solving, and decision making. And these are incredible skills and super important skills for all kids to learn. Okay. And again, when we're providing choices, it's just going to decrease power struggles tremendously, and that's going to help the child, that's going to help the adult, that's going to create a more connected relationship. So it builds respect, it invites cooperation, and all of the other things I said. So here's one thing I did want to talk about, and that is thinking about creating a safe space in your house. And so what do I mean by that? Safe space, quiet space, cozy corner. You can call it whatever you want, but it could be something that you're using as a choice for a child. So it's not time out. It's where a kiddo can go for them to change their inner state and get themselves calmed down. So it's something that can be encouraged when a kiddo is feeling angry, sad, or frustrated. And so this cozy corner, and lots of teachers have these in their rooms, which I think is super awesome. You could have like a beanbag chair in there, or maybe a nice little mat. You could have a basket with fidget toys and things that help kids calm down, stress balls, those types of things. It could be a place where you're really teaching and encouraging your child to take some deep breaths, to calm down, and where you'd have lots of little calming tools for them. So I would suggest that. Another thing you could have in there is a weighted stuffed animal. Yes, they have those. And so I have mine right here, and I call him Duke, and he is in my office at work, and kids, when they come in, often will grab him if they're feeling frustrated or angry, and they'll just hug him. He's about 3 pounds, so he's pretty heavy, and that weight and hugging, it is like just getting a big hug, right? It's similar to a weighted blanket. And so these weighted stuffed animals are really helpful for kids that have anxiety, ADHD, or are on the autism spectrum, but they're going to help any kiddo who's dysregulated in any way. They're just going to love one of these. So this is Duke. We call him Duke. Originally, this was called, what was your name? Oh, Bailey the Bulldog. And I changed the name. And so this bulldog was $59. So you might say, oh, that's kind of expensive. They have other ones, if you go on Amazon, that are less expensive than this. But I love him, really, really well made. And you can throw them in the wash as well. You could also consider a weighted blanket. You could get a weighted throw blanket. That's lovely too. So there's research behind those weighted blankets. They actually do calm the nervous system down, which is going to calm us down. Remember, there's a mind-body connection to those strong feelings and emotions that we have and that kids have. So weighted blankets are nice. That could be, in your little cozy corner, calm down corner, or whatever you call it. But I would suggest that. That's just super beneficial. You can't go wrong with that. So that is something that I would suggest you try. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Keep practicing and really keep thinking about kind of if your limit setting isn't working, think about all the things we talked about and see if you can kind of tweak some things there. So next week we're going to talk about really some things that we can do to boost our kids' self-esteem. So we're going to focus on that next week. And yeah, so we're going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed today's session. This would be a great time to hit that subscribe button, and I'd appreciate a thumbs up if you found this helpful at all. I look forward to seeing you next week. Keep practicing that ACT method. If you have any questions for me, just put them down in the comment section or let me know how you're doing. That would be super awesome. I would really appreciate that. Don't forget to be kind, and until next time.